I wish I had more time for you, Ms. Campbell, but I've seen a lot of activist judges, and I'm not saying you're the most activist, but the list you're on, it sure doesn't take long to call the roll. Let me finish with this question. I'm going to end as I began, Judge Lipez. You have more sympathy for criminals than victims, don't you? Do you know Micah Smith?
Michael Smith, Senator?
Micah, M-I-C-H.
I don't believe I know a Micah Smith, Senator, no.
You're embarrassed to answer my question, aren't you?
Have you ever watched a Senate hearing so tense you could feel the silence between the questions? Because when Senator John Kennedy took his seat at the Judiciary Committee hearing, he didn't raise his voice, he let the record do the talking. One sentence is all it took to make the room go still. Do you have more sympathy for criminals than victims? He wasn't reading a headline. He wasn't making accusations. He was quoting the nominee's own decisions, word for word. And when he dropped the first name, Micah Smith, the judge acted like she didn't recognize it. Bad move. Kennedy reminded her, and everyone watching, who Micah Smith really was. A man convicted of molesting 2 children. No debate. No confusion. Just facts. Kennedy didn't sugarcoat it. He read the court documents out loud. Testimony from the case described exactly what Smith had done, repeatedly, to multiple victims. And then came the part that no one could believe. The same judge, now sitting before the Senate, hoping for a lifetime appointment, had said this at sentencing. This is a very tragic situation of a person who has a lot of good in him. That wasn't from an opinion piece. That wasn't taken out of context. Those were her own words.
You have more sympathy for the criminal than the victim, don't you?
Senator, I worked on behalf of victims of crime zealously as a prosecutor. As a judge, I listened carefully to understand impact on victims, and I have always take that into account.
Do you know Micah Smith?
Michael Smith, Senator?
Micah, M-I-C-H.
I don't believe I know a Micah Smith, Senator, no.
Okay. I bet the victims of Micah Smith remember Micah Smith if you don't.
Senator, there was a defendant I sentenced named Michael Smith.
Mr. Smith molested a 4-year-old girl, didn't he?
Senator, he was convicted after trial of unlawful sexual contact under Maine law.
That's a nice way of putting it.
That was the charge, Senator.
Right. Mr. Smith molested a 9-year-old girl, didn't he?
Senator, again, he was convicted of unlawful sexual contact against 2 children. In that case, I did impose the sentence the state requested.
At oral argument, this is how Mr. Smith's conduct was described. Quote, you heard this testimony. All of the abuse is done in the same fashion. Smith would rub his fingers in a circular motion on the vagina of each child, and he did so repeatedly. Now, where I come from, we call that sexual. You can pretty it up all you want to, Judge. This is what you said at Mr. Micah's sentencing.
And Kennedy asked the only question that mattered. Did I read that correctly? The judge fumbled, tried to claim she hadn't read the transcript, suggested maybe it came from the newspaper. Kennedy didn't flinch. You might have forgotten, he said, but I bet the victims haven't. And that's when it got worse. Because Kennedy wasn't just concerned with the words. He brought up the sentence itself. Smith was given 12 years, but 6 were suspended. And even though the judge tried to pass the blame, saying the state recommended it, Kennedy wasn't buying it. But that was your sentence, wasn't it? She eventually admitted it, because there was no other option. Then Kennedy pulled out something else, a newspaper headline. Light sentences. Send the message that domestic violence doesn't matter. It was about her courtroom, her decisions. And again, she pushed back. She said the article misrepresented the case, said the jury had acquitted the defendant of the worst charge, said she was bound by the jury's verdict. But by then her defense didn't matter. The record had already spoken.
This is what you said at Mr. Micah's sentencing. These are your words, not mine. What I can say, you said, is that this is a very tragic situation of a person who has a lot of good in him, a lot of good in him, having done a very reprehensible thing to 2 young children causing extreme damage. Did I read that correctly?
But Kennedy leaned in and said what everyone else was thinking. You're embarrassed to answer my question, aren't you? And that was it. No gavel slam, no shouting match. Just a quiet moment where the nominee sat, exposed, not by spin, not by slander, but by her own record. This hearing wasn't about politics. It wasn't about partisanship. It was about whether someone with a history of going soft on predators, someone who minimized abuse, suspended sentences for child offenders, should be handed even more power. And Kennedy made sure the American people saw it.
Senator, in that case, I imposed the sentence the state requested.
Did I read that, your quotation, correctly?
Senator, that I think is a portion of what I said at sentencing. My focus was on...
But the words I read, are they correct?
That's what was reported in the paper, Senator. I have not seen a transcript of the sentencing.
I bet the victims remember, Judge. You might have forgotten, just like you forgot his name, but I bet the victims remember. And then you handed down a sentence. You gave Mr. Smith 12 years, but you suspended 6 of them, didn't you?
Senator, that was at the recommendation of the state because
but it was your ruling. Did you? Is that an accurate statement of your ruling?
Senator, I accepted the state's recommendation that 6 years should be suspended so that Mr. Smith would be required to participate in treatment.
I appreciate the lengthy explanation, but I think it's a pretty simple question. That was your sentence, right?
Yes, I imposed the sentence the state requested in that case.
Are you familiar with the Bangor Daily News?
I am the Bangor Daily News, Senator.
Right. Did you read the article they wrote, quote, "Light sentences send a message that domestic violence does not matter," end quote. You remember that article?
I have read it, Senator. I believe it mischaracterizes a case that is
That
described.
article was about you, wasn't it?
My recollection, Senator, is that it described several different cases. The case that I worked on that was described there, the defendant in that case was acquitted by a jury of the most serious conduct, and that was not reflected in that article. And so
the newspaper got it wrong.
That was an op-ed that I believe misunderstood what happened, which is the jury acquitted the defendant of the most serious conduct that he was charged with. I was not the fact finder in that case, and so at sentencing I was bound by the jury's verdict.
Let me ask you, I'm going to run out of time here. I wish I had more time for you, Ms. Campbell, but I've seen a lot of activist judges, and I'm not saying you're the most activist, but the list you're on, it sure doesn't take long to call the roll. Let me finish with this question. I'm going to end as I began, Judge Lipez. You have more sympathy for criminals than victims, don't you?
Senator, I have the support of the Maine Coalition to End Domestic Violence and the Maine Coalition Against Sex. I believe that support is a reflection of the work I did as a prosecutor, as well as the care I take with cases involving victims as a judge.
You're embarrassed to answer my question, aren't you?
Now it's your turn. Do you think this nominee should be confirmed? Or do her past rulings say more than any speech ever could? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you believe these kinds of hearings matter, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on, because this isn't the last time someone tries to rewrite justice from the bench. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.